Hello and welcome to another episode of Shooting the Shit Uncensored. I am your host, Multicontinental Wrestling Alliance, and this evening I just want to say a special thank you to Generational Wrestling Society and WCW Nation and Wrestling Maniacs for allowing us to stream in their groups to bring you this interview. Also, I would like to make a special mention to our lovely sponsors that are Signal Studios, Mayan Belts, A-Rock Designs, and Immortal Restoning. Signal Studios is the premium recording studio in Sydney, Australia. They can make beats for you, music for you, whatever you need. They can make it and send it out to you. If you need a space to record music, you can go there. Mayan Belts, they are the best belt makers in the world. If you want a custom championship belt or a replica championship belt, hit up Eddie and Ira Williams on Facebook, who represent Mayan Belts, and get one of their belts today. They are affordable, they have payment plans, and they are amazing championship belts. Also, my next sponsor is A-Rock Designs. A-Rock Designs make custom cups, hoodies, t-shirts, keychains, you name it, they make it. Ashley Rodriguez, another very good friend of mine. She is the owner and creator of A-Rock Designs, and she does amazing work. She makes wrestling-related cups and merchandise, but also makes non-wrestling related stuff as well. So I've got 3 cups on the way from her as well, which I can't wait to get. Also, Immortal Restoning. If you've got an old title belt laying around that has like stones falling out of it, needs a little bit of a facelift, contact Jeff Parthay at Immortal Restoning, and he'll be able to hook you up and make that belt shine again. So make sure you contact all of my sponsors. You can find them all on Facebook. Now, introducing my guest for this evening. He is the chief. He is HeadHunter Rig.
How you going, brother?
HeadHunter. How are you this evening, mate?
Good, mate. Just hanging out in Newey. What about you?
Oh, mate, just doing the same here in Sydney, man. You keeping safe throughout this whole coronavirus shit, mate, or what?
Yeah, I'm a bit over it, but we're all safe here, so there's no worries. We're pushing through, just sort of getting through day by day, and I'm sure the same as everybody else. We're a bit over it, but hopefully it settles down in the next few months or so, yeah?
Yeah, man, absolutely. I think we're definitely on the way here in Australia. I think the numbers keep dropping. I think everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So, they're keeping safe and keeping distance. So, it is what it is. Hopefully we'll be seeing the end of it very soon. But, mate, getting into it. So, you've been wrestling a fair bit lately. Pretty much all around New South Wales before coronavirus hit. You worked for Newey Pro down in Newcastle, IWA here in Sydney. But mate, how did you get firstly, how did you get into professional wrestling? Where did the love for professional wrestling come from?
I think it's sort of like the cliche answer of you just sort of grew up with it, but I did sort of grow out of it as well. I was a rugby league player from like very young to 15, I think under 15. So like maybe between years of me being 12 and 15, I just sort of fell out of the whole wrestling scene. And then when I was done with footy, I just sort of picked up my other love as a kid, which was wrestling, and realised it was just down the road in Newey, and just sort of got into it from there. Like, it's not too far from where I was living at the time. And I thought it was a no-brainer, a good way to keep fit.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Like, pro wrestling is one thing, but I don't think people actually understand how much physical energy it takes to get in the ring. Like, I think people see it on TV and think, oh yeah, I could get in there. It doesn't look that hard. Yeah. But once you get in there and start taking some of those bumps and, running those ropes and doing, what you need to do to, you really have to have strong cardio.
Yeah, even before I started getting in the ring, because like there's in some places, and especially in Newcastle, like, you have to pass a certain physical and safety exam before you get in the ring because someone else's life's in your hands. So our fitness part outside the ring was just absolutely crazy. It was probably, to this day, one of the worst exercises that I've ever done. I was just that beaten down from it just because I was so out of shape when I joined the business.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, even then, now you would have a much more greater respect for the business going through that, understanding what it takes to to be in the ring, to just compete in the ring, to be able to do that at the level of fitness that you need to be, you know. And that's the thing. Is one thing looking at it and going, yeah, I can do that, to getting in there and actually be able to doing it at a level which people will pay the ticket to see you do it.
Yeah, yeah, that's
You know,
something. Like when I was growing up, you think this would be so cool to do, but that's why it's so rewarding now. Once we've been training for so many years, and you're doing some of the stuff on the same level as some of the people you grew up watching. So like, to be doing the same sort of level and like stuff that you've seen as a kid, and you like, I can do this now, and you're doing this in front of like sold out crowds most of the time these days. It's pretty rewarding in a way.
so you're getting a lot of sold out crowds lately at shows. I mean, obviously prior to Corona.
Yeah, like Newcastle, that's sort of like an unsung hero in sold out crowds. Like they have been like drawing at least like 400 each show for the last like year and a half, 2 years.
Really?
It sort of goes under the radar, and I praise Newcastle for this because they don't. Every time they like sell out a show, like a full packed house, they're not going to blab about it like just on the internet and whatnot, because people know that many people come to the shows. So every time you're going to do it, people are going to get sick saying, "Hey, we sold out again." People just know the packed house is always at Newcastle.
Yeah, right. And is it usually the same people, like the same fans coming to Newey Pro? Like,
Yeah,
are there the same fans every month or every week?
it is the same fans for the months and everything, but they've been coming for years, and they just get onto their friends and whatnot, and that just grows the number each time.
Yeah. And like, does that allow you guys to obviously work on storylines? Because I know, like, independent wrestling, like especially untelevised wrestling, it would really be hard to do sort of continue to do storylines on an independent level. How do you guys find it down in Newcastle with building a storyline, building like, you know, a good quality feud between two guys?
I think the storyline aspect in Newcastle, we've got it down pat. It's something we've sort of done for such a long time now, and the storylines we've put out for maybe like the last 5 years, because that's when I've been there. Every storyline keeps people coming back when there's a bigger crowd, and I think the storylines. I don't think there's been a bad one because everybody's so invested, and each time there's a new match, there's basically a new storyline. If we do like an 8-match card, there's probably 6 of those matches that has a line or it's leading to something else.
Yeah, right. So there's always like a build up for a few of those matches, and some of those matches are just fillers, obviously. So, but that's the thing in pro wrestling, you have to first be beaten down and really tested to see if you want to be a part of it, and that's the thing is, you know, not everyone can be a pro wrestler, not everyone can get in there and do what you guys do. Yeah. And you know that's the thing. Every pro wrestling fan at one point of their life has dreamt about being a professional wrestler.
Yeah, for sure.
But, you know, very few worldwide actually go and do it, whether it's on an independent level or people that make it to, you know, the international level or to the, you know, the big time WWE, etc. Yeah. But how did you come up with the gimmick for HeadHunter Rig? Like, what was the sort of premise behind that for you?
So it's more so like, obviously I started and I was wrestling as Oliver Young, and there was just nothing. It was a rookie. So that was just nothing. I had just generic gear. I'm just sort of breaking in. And then I moved into the big rig gimmick, which was like an outback sort of trucker.
Yeah.
I had that for a while, but I got to a point where I didn't see it progressing as much as I wanted it to.
Sure.
And then like this opportunity, it was super weird how the headhunting thing come up. An opportunity presented itself a few years back where something with going to train at China or something came up, and then myself and Carter Deems were going to look into doing it. We said, if we're going to go over there, what sort of Australian gimmick do we want to portray? And we just sort of went with the outback hunting type thing. That fell through, and then we decided to tag as the Headhunters. when IWA gave us the call up to come and start working for them. So there's really no like super big thought into the gimmick. It just sort of progressed over time, and it progressed for the better, I think. Because over time, I look back at photos now when I first started the gimmick, and it's just like not believable at all. I still look like a 12-year-old wearing camo. So now that I can put on a bit more size, and sometimes when I use the face paint and the blood paint and whatnot, it sort of gets the whole gimmick together. And I think it comes back to like, if you're a new fan, as soon as I walk through the curtain, you sort of know who I am, even if you don't know the characters.
Yeah, so we actually have a couple of viewer questions that want to ask. First off is Facebook user. So Facebook user, click the link above and allow access so we can see who you are. But it says, "Hi Headhunter, hope your quarantine is going well. My question is, what are your future plans? Will you ever join NXT?" Well, I'm pretty sure Headhunter would take that contract or that phone call if it came.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would. Future plans, like I used to have plans of like I want to go everywhere around the world and wrestle and whatnot. A lot of the big places, when I said that, have sort of dropped off now. And I was speaking to Matty Wahlberg recently, and he said like we just want to like grow the scene here more. The more I was up here, the more to start doing this is like maybe at one point like a full-time paid job for all of us. So if we can grow the scene as much as possible here, like that would be an absolute banger of a time for us. NXT, I mean, sure, amazing. I think everybody would like that. And I don't think they've really seen something of my character before. I don't know if they've had something similar to me. So,
but you know what? That's the thing. Like building Australian wrestling here, like for a long time, Australian wrestling has been there. Like it's nothing new in Australia. Like we were talking, in the back earlier, and we were talking, about how I used to go to IWA shows like in the early 2000s. You know what I mean? Like now it's 2020, and IWA is still going. AWF is still going 20 years plus. You've got your AWEs, you've got your MCWs, your PWAs, like your Newy Pros. These companies are flourishing here in Australia, and you are seeing the talent coming through on the international level. And I think Australia now, in the last probably 5 to 8 years, has really Australians have really started to make their mark in professional wrestling. But, the talent has always been here. But now I think Australians are really starting to come into their own. I think pro wrestling is really starting to take notice of Australia, is what I should say. But
yeah,
would you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, I think like before everything sort of turned to shit, before the whole pandemic thing come in, there was like international like people, they want to come here to wrestle. So it's going to get to the point soon enough where like we're going to just be staying home and coming to the shows as usual, but there's going to be people traveling international to come and work with us and see what all our companies are about, because we're getting to the level now, production, wrestling, and everything in between, that we're world class just as it is.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is as well, and you hear a lot of wrestlers say too, in order to get better at in pro wrestling, is to wrestle people that are better than you. But it's also consistency as well. It's if you put the reps in and you're at training, you're doing it, you're working on things on a daily basis. And I heard you make mention to Twitter and and social media presence. And in this day and age, that is just as important as a part as the character is your social media presence, because that's what your fans, your haters, your followers, your lovers, whatever it may be, they want to hear from you and see what you got to say, or see what you got to say next. And that's obviously massive compared to what it was like 20 or 30 years ago, when it was the wild west.
And I don't think it's hard in a way, because we go back to the social media for a second. I spend a lot of time on social media because I enjoy it. And especially in this time where we're sort of all stuck inside. But if I wasn't a fan of social media, but I wanted to keep it up and up to date, it takes 5 minutes to post a photo a day or put up a status or a tweet or something. So if you want to like keep the social media game going, it takes 5 minutes to post on all Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram a day. But But like me, I'm enjoying the social media, so I'm happy to spend an hour or two on it a day.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, that's what we do is social media. That's what our platform is. That's where our shows are streamed on. So for us, we definitely understand that. And, you know, and that's the thing, the fact that we are able to connect on a social media level, you know, otherwise, you know what I mean? Like, I'd be coming up to you after a show going, "Hey, man, can I talk to you on an interview?" Yeah, like, but, you know, and that's where, like, it's much more accessible, and you're much more accessible to obviously fans, but also to, you know, your audience to see what you're up to at, you know, any given time. So
yeah,
or whatever you want to put out on your social networks. But how do you find that the Aussie scene at the moment out there with companies? You know, is it cutthroat with companies at the moment? Like, or obviously pre-corona, of course, but is it usually cutthroat with companies trying to sort of, you know, run against each other, or does everyone sort of work in a pretty relaxed harmony?
I think where I am anyway, there's a pretty good circle of companies that sort of work around each other, and I believe there's some sort of group where a lot of the top people in each company can talk and say, "Hey, these are our dates, whatnot." So I think it's pretty. This is like I'm talking like the sort of top class wrestling with Newey and PWA and all that. They sort of don't run against each other. If there is one, I think the promoters or bookers are pretty smart enough to change it to a night before or a night after.
Yeah.
Especially a lot of people, it works better sometimes if you're promoting a double header or a triple header weekend, because some people can plan for 3 shows in a row because fans love that. So,
yeah. And, you know, and that's the thing as well. You can also then have the opportunity to book different talent. You know what I mean? Like, because if you're running against someone, then essentially you can't book the same guys on the same show unless your show's a couple of hours apart, you know. But even then, you're probably cutting it fine.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but how do you find wrestling obviously in Sydney compared to wrestling in Newcastle? Like, obviously speaking to you, Newcastle seems like home for you, and obviously seems like that's your home base. But how do you compare it to wrestling in Sydney? Is there much of a difference with the two?
I'll split it into 3 things for you. So like Newcastle was like, as you said, home for me, and it's very family-based. Newcastle Pro Wrestling, there's normally, as I said earlier, like 350 to 400 people at each show, and it's very family-based. Like a lot of the front 3 rows will be kids and families, and then maybe towards the back will be maybe some blokes on the piss.
Me and Charles.
Yeah. The new shows are good. Like I like that crowd and I like the atmosphere, only because it's always full. Sydney's great if I'm talking PWA, just because it's such the current and sort of indie vibe, and that's the show that most of the time the bigger eyes in the wrestling world will be watching. So they're the shows you want to be on. The crowd's very responsive. The crowd's respectful as well. That's something that a lot of we stress a lot these days, because we do have people every now and then have too many bevies and they'll jump into the ring at the end of the show, and they'll definitely regret it.
You ever had someone try and jump in and shoot on you?
Yeah, there's been 2 times. Once at a Newcastle show. I don't know why, but they jumped in an 8-man tag match. So there's 8 wrestlers in one of them, or something like that.
And who did he go? Did he go after anyone specifically, or was he just going in there trying to like?
I think he tried to tackle one of the boys, and then he tried to give himself his own bump or something. And then
just tried to take a flat back by himself.
Yeah, and he got a few boots to the midsection and then escorted out by the security. The second time we were on tour for IWA, and this was like a big group of drunks, and this 2 or 3 guys come into the ring and just, I think one tried to F you, one of the other ones.
Yeah.
I was selling at the time outside, but I also had a kendo stick on me, so I used that to get rid of him.
So you whooped the fuck out of him.
Yeah, I smacked a few of the boys, and even I think they dropped like their wallet and phone in the ring, so they had to get it off security, and I think they got like a ban or something. So yeah, they learned the lesson.
Yeah, right. So,
But yeah,
geez, man.
back to your question. I think another different vibe compared to Sydney and PWA is IWA, because it's also like family based, but it's also like a touring company, and like people like know what it's like because, as you said, it's been around for so long. And like, I think the vibe there at IWA, like they have some killer shows. Like, there's a few shows here and there. You go, oh, the crowd wasn't as responsive tonight, but sometimes when they do like a huge event, and they usually do about like 2 or 3 like big events a year, and like they're always packed. I'm talking like close to 300, 400. So the vibe there is sort of like in between of the rowdiness of the inner city PWA and like a family-based Newey Pro.
Yeah, no, that's right. IWA has been around for a long time, and I think, yeah, as you said, that they're more of a touring company. So, you know, IWA back in the day used to have their training school, and you know, and they used to run quite regular shows. But you know, especially around Sydney and stuff. But yeah, like I think probably like from what I've heard the last couple of years, well, last few years, I should say, they've just sort of been doing the rounds. But like, I don't even think they've got tag titles in their bit company at the moment anymore, do they?
IWA?
Yeah.
No tag titles. They've just got the heavyweight and trans Tasman.
Yeah,
and
right.
Also a regional title, which is one they just put on the line when we go on tours and whatnot, which is a bit of a laugh sometimes. So that's always fun.
Really, I haven't heard of that one yet. So, but you know what,
if you ever catch an IWA tour, I'm sure you'll see a regional championship match.
Well, you know what? Like back, as I said, back in the day, I had a buddy that used to wrestle for the IWA. So I used to go to quite a few shows around the place. And I live in Engadine, and about a couple of months ago, you guys were actually performing at at my local pub around the corner. And I said to my wife, I got to go to this show. I got to go to this show. And I was going to go, but then my kid got sick. So I obviously had to sort of not go that night. But you know, definitely spewing I missed it, but you know, I think next time around I'm definitely going to be catching an IWA show and definitely checking you guys out. But yeah, look, I think that the PWA, you know, is probably the most well-known Australian promotion at the moment, besides obviously World Series Wrestling. You know, and you know, there are a couple of big ones like Melbourne as well, Melbourne Championship Wrestling, or Melbourne City Wrestling, sorry. You know, have you had a chance to travel interstate and wrestle around Australia?
No, that's one thing that pops up, and a lot of people like sort of send my way a lot is, have I been interstate? No, I haven't. I've sort of just stayed within New South Wales and the companies I know. Obviously, it's something I want to do, but I just sort of haven't got the sort of right opportunity yet. I've been in talks. Like, I'm good mates with Chris Basso from Adelaide. So I always get in touch with him and find his dates and see if we can go over and catch up and maybe get a show in if we can. Perth would be good. I think there's like 1 or 2 in Adelaide that are super good, and I haven't been to Melbourne yet, but it's definitely on the cards.
Well, Adelaide, Riot.
Yeah, right. And also a few of the boys that wrestle Rampage as well also say to me I should come over. So.
No, Adelaide gets some good shows. We've got a buddy of ours from Adelaide. You know, and every time Rhea Ripley's name gets mentioned, he's like, "She's from my home promotion." Yeah. So we always every time Rhea Ripley comes over, he goes, "Oh, my hometown." So, but yeah. Look, what are your obviously when you got into wrestling? What were some of the goals that you really sort of had set out for yourself? Obviously, for a short term and a long term.
I think obviously short term, as soon as I started training, was to just get on the Newcastle shows and just sort of make the debut. This was obviously I wanted to like make a name for myself, but I still didn't have the character then. Right now, goals, as I mentioned, I'd like to just sort of get my name towards the top of Australian wrestling more and just sort of snag up as many opportunities as possible. Like super long term, once again, I would like to do some traveling. And see what I can get. Definitely, we've been trying a lot to like get our resumes up to date and trying to get some good footage of ourselves and send them overseas, some of the bigger companies we want to work for. But we have the connections now with so many of our guys heading overseas, so we can get them to put a good word in and send our resumes and whatnot with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of in pro wrestling, from what I've heard, is word of mouth as well. So other people putting a word in and saying, oh, yeah, you should check out my buddy Rig. You know, he's a pretty stand-up sort of bloke and a good performer. And it's amazing how much work still gets picked up by a lot of the guys, you know, from the stories that I've heard. But, you know, what were, like, once you obviously, started breaking into wrestling, sorry, who were like some of the guys that really sort of mentored you along the way in the early start of your career?
So as soon as I just come into the business at the House of Free Fighting, it was Adam Hoffman and Jack Bonza. That's who sort of got me in my start in wrestling. And they were at the House of Free Fighting. It was Mondays with Hoff and Wednesdays with Bonza, or vice versa, or something like that. For the first few years, that was just how it went. I'd done a few sessions down in Sydney under like Robbie Eagles, Madison Eagles, Moretti and Ugg and all that, which was pretty good because it's a different coach and you learn something new every time.
Absolutely.
I've done like a few seminars with some international people, but the main learning tree would be Hoffman and Bonza.
Yeah, all right. And with guys like Hoffman and Bonza, they sound like pretty hard-ass type of guys to sort of learn from. So I can imagine that you wouldn't be getting a lot of sympathy from them, but a lot of honest and hard truths about the business. Am I correct in that? Or
I mentioned it. I don't know where it was. I mentioned it the other day. I like it when because Hoffman, or both of them, Hoffman and Bonza, they get hard asses, so you can come back from a match and they'll tell you exactly how it was. I don't want to have a crap match and then come backstage and then pretty it up and say how good it was. I want to know if it was bad or not and where I can do better next time. So that's what they're like. They say, oh, this is what I liked and this is what I didn't like. So they're always telling you and how to improve and whatnot. So
have you ever had a match and gone, man, that was fucking amazing, and then got in the back and then just gone, not so much?
Or I don't know. Sometimes you have the ones where you go, oh, that felt good. And then you go, how wasn't that? Yeah, it was all right. So you just sort of bring it to the level. But there's definitely been a few where I come backstage and I know it was horrible. But that's just the business. So.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like a lot of people, say once they get into pro wrestling, their first match was something awful. Like you've never heard like any professional wrestler go, "Yeah, I got into pro wrestling and man, I picked that shit up fucking easily, man. Like my first match, man, I was ready for the world title, man. Put me in there with Hogan, booked me all around the town's daddy." Like no one's ever said that, and that's the thing. It's if you've got to be open to learn, you've got to be open to sort of adapt to the situation, in wrestling as well. So there's many different factors that go into it. It's not just getting in there and having a simulated fight. It's psychology, it's storyline, it's making something look believable.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's the thing. You look at, and you can take intergender wrestling for an example. Like intergender wrestling can work if it's made to look believable. If you have, a male at a certain weight, height, stature versus a female at an equal weight, height, stature, then yes, that's a believable fight because you've got two fighters, wrestlers, whatever you want to call them, in the ring going at each other. But if it's completely opposite, where you've got someone who's like Dave Bautista going up against Alexa Bliss, that's not going to really, that's not going to be a believable fight that she's going over. So
I think that's why it's intergender in Australia is a good thing because, if, for example, if I was doing a match with, say, like Steph DeLander, we're both the same height. I'm a bit more like beefy and whatnot than she is, but we're similar sort of heights and stature and whatnot. So that'd be like a believable fight. But then also, if I had a match with, say, like Jessica Troy, it's still believable because she's so over as a crazy bitch.
Yeah.
She could still beat me.
Just as a complete lunatic.
Yeah, and I think like that's a good thing with Aussies because like I could get in there as like a big beefy guy and she could be across from me, but they could still be believing that she's going to come out on top.
And is that something like? Are you okay with intergender matches? Like, would if someone said, "Okay, we want you to get in there and go against her," and are you okay with that, or is that like something for you? You're like,
I love it. I reckon I haven't had the opportunity to do it enough, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, all the girls, like, they're killing it. So I'd love to get in there and do a few rounds.
Man, yeah. Look at the Aussie scene, man. There's a lot of talented ladies out there, And you mentioned Madison Eagles, who's been, she's probably the biggest name in Australian in female wrestling, that anyone's ever seen. But there's definitely a lot of talent out there, and I think it's good that you're able to adapt and willing to sort of go down that path if required, because it just shows people a different level of you as a performer as well. So, it gives you that opportunity. But, have you ever been put into a match or a situation where you've thought this is not exactly going to be 100% too safe? Like, has there ever been a bump that you've been asked to take or anything like that you've gone, oh, I'm not 100% sure about this one?
I don't think so. There may have been a few times where I double thought some things, and I go, it's just going to be safe. It's going to be good in the long run. But other than that, it's more stuff that I'd have ideas for. If I have some that I think and I go, that'd be sick, but then a day later or when we get to the match, I think, no, that's stupid. Why'd I think of that? Well, sometimes you realise when it's too late. But I don't think there's never been a thing where someone's asked me to do something. I think everybody's sort of on like a good enough page to like speak up and be open with each other if they're not comfortable. So,
yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, like in Australian wrestling, I mean, are you seeing a lot of crazy bumps that people are taking out there at the moment? Or is it,
I mean, I see a lot of like crazy stuff in a lot of the matches these days, but that's just how the style has evolved. But the thing is, like, obviously we're in the promotions where I work. It's crazy, but it's safe. And they trust the wrestlers to pull it off in a safe way that no one's going to get injured. Most of the time, if someone's getting injured these days, it's just by like an accident or just something that the person has done themselves, whether it's just like they've stepped the wrong way and torn something or rolled an ankle or something like that. But
yeah, and sort of leading into that, we have another viewer question. Sorry, has said, "What has been your worst injury in your time in wrestling? Have you had any severe injuries?"
I've had a few tiny ones, but the most severe one was late last year. I just done like a singles match at one of the hoose parties there, and I just took it was like a running snap DDT. I just sort of didn't protect myself enough, and like I think it was my C3 and 4 on the top of my neck was a little bit compressed.
Shit.
I wasn't sleeping and whatnot. It was probably the worst pain. Like I've broken a few bones before, but like this neck pain was the worst because I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't move too much, couldn't work out. I called wrestling a year, like late October. I bailed on it and I just said it's better in the long run. But yeah, I think I had the compressed sort of disc or something. I did have the name in my X-ray somewhere, but yeah, it wasn't too good. It wasn't a fun time.
What was the outcome for you for that? I mean, was surgery required? Was it just sort of time off to relax and let it heal, or?
Yeah, it was more so just some time off to relax. I went to a few chiro sessions. That sort of released a bit of like pain, and that helped the sleeping and whatnot. Originally, it was just sort of like some medication to see if it was going to take down some inflammation and whatnot. Other than that, it was just resting, and then once I was feeling good, I could get back in the ring and maybe try to run the ropes and get a few bumps in and do some neck strength conditioning and whatnot. But I'm feeling good now. But like as soon as I come back, like bloody 6 weeks after I come back, Ricky South broke my nose, so that was fun.
Jeez. Jesus, yeah. Welcome back to the business, sunshine.
Yeah.
Fuck, man, that's crazy, man. That's scary sort of shit to sort of be here. Was there ever any moment there where you're like, yeah, maybe I don't get back into the ring, or was it like, no, I can't wait to get back into this?
Yeah, it's always like in your head, like especially when you first go to see someone about an injury, you go, what if they just say this is it?
Yeah.
It's scary and all, but I sort of knew, just because I could still walk and move in certain ways, I knew it wasn't super serious, but I knew it was serious enough to have to get it checked out.
Jeez, man, that's crazy. That's crazy. You know, especially when it comes to neck and spinal injuries and stuff like that, is you can never be too sure, especially like even head injuries now. And you know, obviously you see from obviously wrestlers that have been around for, you know, since, you know, 20 or 30 years into the business, some of the damage that they've taken over the years and what they've been protected to now, obviously in WWE with protected chair shots and stuff like that. Where you wrestle obviously with Australia, like some of the bigger promotions like PWA and IWA, and even in UE Pro, would you say that, you know, they have similar sort of rules for protecting with chair shots, that you aren't allowed to take any headshots? They've got to be sort of, you know, certain areas of the body that you can only use like a chair or a weapon, like you're not allowed to go for a headshot?
I think it's more wrestlers' preference in a way. I think some of the big companies that want to grow and have like wrestlers for the long term would advise against it. But I think there's some wrestlers that are just like, yeah, let's do the unprotected chair shot. I personally would probably not do it, especially with the former neck injury and whatnot.
100%. Yeah.
Crest or whatnot. I'm not saying like I don't like the hardcore matches and that. I love them. I enjoy them. But yeah, when it comes to like long-term safety and whatnot, definitely taking the safe route. And I think like a lot of the guys and girls, like I know that PWA main event cage match with Steph and Jess recently. I think there was an unprotected in that match into the head. All good, like no worries and whatnot. I think it's just like some of them, even if it's just like slightly off, sometimes it can be bad in the long term. But obviously that one was safe and both of them were fine.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's hardcore wrestling, and then there's doing hardcore wrestling safely. You know what I mean? Like, there's pro wrestling. There's two types of pro wrestling. There's good pro wrestling and there's bad pro wrestling. Yeah, and then it's the same as hardcore wrestling. There's good hardcore wrestling. There's bad hardcore wrestling. You know, like, and you really put into a situation of, you know, like the person who's doing it, who knows what they're doing, and the person receiving it knows what they're doing, and then they can sort of intertwine those sort of elements or gimmicks, whatever you want to call them, into the matches, and then they can make sense. But you've been a wrestling fan, I'm sure and you've obviously been around wrestling for a while, Rig, as well, mate. So, you know, you've probably seen a lot of bad wrestling. You've probably seen a lot of good wrestling. You've probably seen a lot of like stuff that you just went, mate, that close the door to the backyard, mate. It's on your way out, sort of stuff. But, you know, like, is that something that, you know, you find is accurate, what I'm saying? Or do you think that, you know, hardcore wrestling is what it is and there's no real way to protect yourself doing it?
No, there's definitely ways to protect yourself doing it. But sometimes, like, people really want to push the believability in that, I think. So they're just like, oh, let's just do it. Let's just do whatever it takes to get this reaction and whatnot. And there is certain things, like sometimes there is the adrenaline. You go, oh, I'm so pumped, let's do it. But then you just look in the long run sometimes and you go, like, what was that about? Like, why should we have done that? And as you said, like, there is like really good and there is really bad wrestling. And there is still, like, to this day, especially all around Australia as well. And that's just saying, I don't know if it'll always be there, whether companies will fade out or whatnot, but I'm super confident that the really good wrestling is going to stick around for a definite long time.
Look, I definitely think that the bad stuff sort of fades out. And you look at like pro wrestling in Australia, like New South Wales and Sydney, like I can tell you there's been promotions come and there's been promotions go. Like the only real ones that I can think of that have been in Sydney for like the long haul, off the top of my head, AWF and IWA. Like I think AWE's been around for quite a few years as well, but those are two have been the main staples. And then obviously other companies have been around and stayed for short amounts of time, but you are seeing promotions coming in like UE Pro, You're also seeing like the World Series of Wrestling guys coming in as well. BC Battle Championship Wrestling, MCW. So there are some quality promotions coming out. And, they're bringing some of that international talent, but it's good to see that they are bringing that international talent out, but they're also building up the Australian talent that they have on their roster as well, because that's just as important, because not every show you're going to be blessed to have, an international star, but, you also have to make sure you've got talent that your fans and your viewers are going to want to pay to see.
I think like 90% of the time these days, if a company's going to bring an international wrestler over, or many international wrestlers, the fans, I'd probably say 90% of the fans want to see the international against one of their local guys. And that's what we all want for each other. Like if they bring an international over and like one of your mates gets to wrestle an international guy, it's going to boost him further. And then further along the line, he's going to look after you, and so what? So like, in the long run, I think like putting the internationals against our guy, which World Series has done a few times. A few times when like the nations get to wrestle like the Bucks or the Briscoes and whatnot. That was really good for them, and I think that sort of skyrocketed them a bit further into the King of Trio scene of things as well. So
yeah, absolutely, and it's just the knowledge that you would get. I mean, you mentioned the Briscoes, and in my personal opinion, I think they're probably the greatest tag team in the world.
Yeah, they're great.
Bar none. And, to be able to have a match against them and to be able to learn from them, you're going to take away so much. That, I mean, they've wrestled everybody. They've been around for like years and years and years. And there's so much that you're able to take out of it as well. So, but I think that like, as well, some of these international talents that are coming over and the first time for them to come to Australia, do you see any of these like guys that are shocked from how Australian wrestling is? Like, are they sort of surprised how popular it is, or are they surprised from it, or is it for them just another show, another country sort of thing?
I think it depends where they work. If they're coming to somewhere like World Series Wrestling, they're gonna wrestle top-notch local talent, and they're gonna get top-notch production as well. So they're gonna come into somewhere where it looks like an actual good, legitimate show when the wrestlers are top notch as well. But when we go back to saying there is a lot of bad companies around, like they tend to sometimes spend their cash and bring some of the internationals in, and then those wrestlers have to make the trip to Australia, and they've got to get into the ring with someone who might be unfit or unsafe.
Yeah, and that's the thing then, that they're putting themselves at risk. And potential to
that person's going to go back overseas and say, well, don't go to Australia because they were all crap.
Yeah, exactly. So, but how would you describe the Australian style of pro wrestling? Is there an Australian style? Like, how there's a British style, Japanese style. How would you describe the Australian style?
I don't know. I think
I was wondering if that one might stump you. I was saying it. I'm like, is there an Australian style? So
I don't know. I think it's sort of like there isn't. It's not like the super stiff sort of. Is that what the Japan and so in the British one as well? Like everyone here isn't like super like stiff in you and whatnot. It's more so. I think the whole indie wrestling thing, it's evolving towards that. Like the style of wrestling and the style of the matches are changing. There's no sort of old school stuff anymore. Like some of the old school stuff is so good. And sometimes I wish it would come back into like the scene now to see how it would go. But like the style of the wrestling and the shows and the matches, it's very just going along with the times of how wrestling's progressing.
Oh, 100%. And like, I think and as you mentioned earlier, and I keep going back to PWA only because I'm a huge PWA mark, but never mind me. But PWA, obviously, we all are. But, even like you mentioned with Newy Pro as well, the 18 plus shows where people are closer around the ring and, you're getting that big vibe, like that sort of, that PWG feel, that, that sort of bar wrestling feel, that sort of, even like GCW where they're sort of slapping the ring. That's the sort of stuff that, builds that sort of momentum and sort of fire with it, even in your roster as well. But, as a performer, do you find, wrestling in that environment, it G's you up so much more, like it hypes you up so much more as a performer? Or is it just obviously the same as going out there with a bunch of kids sitting there clapping and
for me, the fans like around the ring or closer to the ring in general is just the best. If you can and I think it's to the point if they're respectful enough. So if you're going to hit the ropes and they're not going to try and trip you or touch you or whatnot, they respect the wrestling in the ring and they can just be there and enjoy it up close and personal. It's like probably one of the best crowds you'll get. I mean, there's not much better than like a full crowd, whether it's not, even if they're not around the ring, but if you get a full arena and you can just know that it's a full arena sold out from your show, that's a good feeling. But I think, for me, some of my favorite crowds would be if they're around the ring. For example, like the Lucha Fantastica shows, they do really good stuff there at Marrickville. And like the fans always around the ring, there's always like 400 people there just partying and whatnot. Some of like probably.
Have you been on any of their shows?
Yeah, I've been on 3 or 4 now. So yeah, they've been some of the best fun I've had in wrestling, and they're not even just the real thing. So half of the crowd there is just people partying, and the other half's normally like a general wrestling crowd. Yeah,
right. And do you have to don a hood to wrestle there, like with the lucha stuff?
Yeah, definitely don a hood. I think Concrete is the only guy who doesn't don the hood because he's just the strongman sort of circus gimmick there. But everyone else.
Right. Yeah, right. So, I'll definitely have to make sure to check it out. Charles, when you're in Sydney, mate, we'll have to go down there and once quarantine is over and have a few beers and watch our boy Rig here do some Lucha Libre. So,
I'm down for it.
But, I can pull out
when you were saying, like, fans being respectful and not tripping you up, being that close to the ring, have you ever run the ropes and had someone like just go, hey mate, come here, grab your ankle and pull you down? Or
no, I've never had it because more so they're probably scared of what I do to them.
Whoa.
I know a few of the girls have had a bit of a bad experience, as you can expect if they were selling somewhere and obviously just a drunk idiot would do something to them inappropriate. But other than that, they learn the hard way when they get a foot in the face straight after that. So.
Yeah, man. Hey, don't fuck around at a wrestling show, man. You go there, you be respectful, you cheer, you boo, you do your thing. Just do not touch the fucking wrestlers, man. It's like a strip club, bro. You can sit there, you can watch, you can throw money at them. They actually like it if you throw money at them. Just don't fucking touch them. As simple as that, man. It's, and that, what? That's a pretty respectful thing to ask for, man, to be honest with you. So. But, Rig, before we sort of start wrapping things up, man, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, so everyone can find me. My Facebook and Twitter is the same. It's just at HeadHunter Rig. My Instagram is at headhunter.rig. You can, on my Instagrams recently, I've been starting to go live every Wednesday night, just chatting to an Aussie wrestler, a friend of mine, getting everybody to know behind the scenes, sort of look at their lives and their journeys and whatnot. I think I'm going to transfer that to a podcast soon. I'll let you guys know, and we can go from there. Wrestler merch is up and running, which is really good for a lot of the Aussie wrestlers now. So I'm on wrestler merch. I think it's just under PWA Wrestlers, and I'm the HeadHunter Rig. But that's everywhere where you guys can find me.
Nice one. Head over there and get yourself a HeadHunter Rig shirt. So maybe that's the thing. So Charles is in charge of all of our giveaways and that sort of stuff. So maybe that's an idea for our next giveaway, Charles.
Yeah, I'm down for that. For sure.
Yeah, there you go. We can talk after the show. But guys, look, thank you very much. First of all, Rig, thanks very much for coming on, mate. I really appreciate your time and coming on and giving us tonight. And firstly, I must apologize for the internet issues that we had this evening. So I had to quickly hotspot because my Wi-Fi shit itself. And so I apologize about that happening. And that's why we had to bring in Charles. So Charles, thank you for being a gracious gentleman and joining us. And I do apologize for that, Rig. But again, I would like to thank our special sponsors. So Signal Studios, Mayan Belts, A-Rock Designs, and Immortal Restoning. You can find all of our lovely sponsors on Facebook for all of their services, and I encourage you all to go check them out. Immortal Restoning, they will update, refresh, make that championship belt look brand new again. So hit them up. A-Rock Designs, they will make you a custom pro wrestling cup. Even if you don't want a pro wrestling cup, they'll make you something else nice and custom in a cup, keychain, or t-shirt. Mayan Belts, they are the best premium belt makers in the business in the world today. If you want a replica championship belt of your favorite title belt, hit up Mayan Belts. Or if you want something custom, hit them up. Eddie and Ira Williams on Facebook. Also, Signal Studios, my boy Rafi in Sydney, Australia. He's got his recording studio there. They also make beats, tunes, music. If you need anything, hit them up. But again, this has been Shooting the Shit Uncensored. Rig, thank you very much for joining us. Charles, thank you for joining later, coming in late as well. But guys, we'll catch you on our next episode. But guys, thanks very much for having us, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Cheers.
Very good.